kind of guy I am. Hello, we're live. Excellent stuff. And I'm also going to go to...
Howdy, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Well, yes, well, when everyone decides to join us, if anyone decides to join us, because this is incredibly impromptu. Okay, I'm running around because I'm getting my headphones and stuff. But yes, this is kind of not our standard kind of setup. Usually I would do a show on a Sunday. Hi, my name's Leonard Sultana, by the way. I post under the title An Englishman in San Diego. And I do a show on a Sunday called Talking Comic-Con, A Cup of Tea with an Englishman in San Diego. What we're doing today, however, is something that came off the back of a couple of live periscopes that my guest put out on Monday and over the weekend after she got the chance to see Marvel's Inhumans. So she was very positive about the show and about the potential for where the show can go. I was not so much. And what we're going to do is talk about, and I thought, you know what, let's actually talk this out. Let's actually talk about Inhumans, talk about its potential, talk about what it can mean for the MCU, and basically get into all of that. And we're going to do a full intro in a second. Let me plug myself in here. And but first things first, just a couple of minutes just to introduce ourselves in terms of where you can find us and what who we are and what we do. So like I say, that's where you can, or what I usually do in terms of my live stuff, which is on a Sunday, which is 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. It's a show which talks about Comic-Cons and con culture. But you can also find out my stuff on my website, An Englishman in San Diego, and also on my social medias, EnglishmanSDCC. I'm joined by Carolyn Poddig. Have I got the surname right?
Yeah, you got the absolutely perfect. Ironic because it's German, and I
usually I mess something up, so I wanted to make sure I get the surname right at the very least. So that's cool. So yeah, so thank you very much indeed for joining us. But shall we do a kind of like an intro for the audio version?
Sounds good to me.
Do that. Oh, well, tell you what, first things first, where people can find you, and certainly about what's coming up on Marvel Report. So if you want to do that. Great.
Okay. My name's Carolyn Poddig. I'm a senior staff writer for the Marvel Report. We're an independent outlet with founded by Andy Beckbat and Lauren Galloway. And right now we've got some we're working on getting some Inhumans news out there. There's a lot coming out in October. There's The Gifted, there's Inhumans. So we're going to have kind of a little bit of Marvel's resurrection, if you will, in television, because you're going to have The Gifted on Tuesday nights and you're going to have Inhumans on Friday nights for most of September, well, for September and then leading into October. And then you're also, we're also waiting eagerly, like everybody else, for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5 to come back. And we know nothing, y'all know nothing, and follow any updates. I usually tend to stick towards more powered, superpowered people on my Twitter feed. That's at CarolynsGeekOut on Twitter. No apostrophes, no nothing, just CAROLYN GeekOut. I also just started
because I used to know you as is it SoCal Ramen?
Yeah, I wanted
that's why I got confused.
I wanted to rebrand myself because I figured that I needed some people were starting to treat me as a professional for some unknown reason, so I figured I needed a
what?
I know, right?
What's all that about? Okay. Excellent. Well, that's cool. Like I say, all of that's coming up on Marvel Report. I'm very much interested to find out more about the other coverage that you go do on that. So that's cool. So here we go. Audio version, audio intro for the audio version. Okay. Hi, my name's Hi there. My name's Leonard Sultana. I'm an Englishman in San Diego, and welcome to Battle Royale, the great Inhumans debate with myself and Carolyn's Geek Out. Carolyn Poddig, who's from the Marvel Report, and joining us for this rather impromptu discussion about Marvel's Inhumans. It's a show which has already gotten a lot of opinions online in terms of the things that people have already seen in IMAX screens. This is a show that is going to be coming out at the end of this month, but has already had the first 2 episodes shown in IMAX. It's a show that has been co-financed by the IMAX Corporation, so they had a very invested element in the actual production of this show, but it is a Marvel television show at the end of the day. First things first, welcome along, Carolyn. I'm glad you could join me.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My very first podcast, everybody. So just so you know, if I make any mistakes, feel free, bring it to me. I appreciate that.
No worries at all. Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, usually I do a podcast on a Sunday, which is a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. It says an awful lot. If we're going to be talking about the Inhumans, this is a rather nice Sauvignon Blanc, okay? And frankly, I'm going to be drinking this throughout the course of the show, because I feel that alcohol may be required on my side for this particular podcast, because I certainly felt there were things, I'm going to try and be diplomatic at the start, that were severely lacking with this particular show. Whereas Carolyn did jump in on Periscope and on her Twitter very much in the defense of the show, and she felt that there were some very big themes, which we will get into in the course of today's episode. First things first, just to give you an update of what the show is about, we're going to be talking about Marvel's Inhumans. It's an American TV series created for ABC by showrunner Scott Buck, based on the Marvel Comics characters created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in December 1965 for Fantastic Four issue 45. The series is produced by ABC Studios and Marvel Television in association with Devilina Production, with IMAX Entertainment as a financing partner, with Scott Buck on writing duties for the first 2 episodes, and directed by Roll Rennie. The series is centered on Inhumans ruler Black Bolt, portrayed by Anson Mount, and other members of the Inhuman royal family, played by Surinder Swan, Ken Leung, Imi. No, I'm going to have to help me out. Go on then. Yeah, I always get that wrong. Yeah.
Mike Moe is Triton. Ken Leung is Karnak. We've got Abby Cornish as Crystal, Medusa's younger sister, and then the fantastically talented Ramsey Bolton, also known as Ewan Rayhone, also known as Maximus the Mad.
Well, yes. I mean, they didn't go into the whole kind of the subtitles of the characters in this particular.
We forgot, and my apologies to everybody. We forgot Imi Uwa, and I know I'm going to butcher this. My apologies.
That's the one I struggle with.
I know, right? Imi Uwakajor. Apologies, sir, if you happen to hear this. Who plays Gorgon, who is probably one of my favorite actors to come out of this show.
Cool. Okay, the storyline is basically the Inhumans exist in a technologically advanced city, which is Atalan, located on the dark side of the moon. It's undiscovered and unknown by the rest of humanity. After a military coup, the Inhuman royal family escape to Hawaii, where they must regroup, defend themselves, and ultimately save the world.
Isn't that where you'd go after? I mean, if you could, Hawaii.
I've seen Apple screensavers. It looks pretty. I'd go there.
Exactly.
Okay, right. So what we've decided for the for this is we're going to start with a 3 minutes each case for the prosecution and a case for the defense. Now I've just hit random.org, and sorry, Carolyn, you're up first. Okay. So yeah, it's yourself that's going to do this. What I'm going to do now is hit my countdown, and basically 3 minutes is what you have to defend the Inhumans. Okay, so here we go. 3 minutes starting now.
Much like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and other Marvel properties, sometimes it takes a twist in the story to develop these characters. Now, by no means are these characters perfect, but with the Inhumans, I think that there's enough potential here for fans of the MCU to at least consider keeping them around. When you have characters who deal with sized attitudes, it can be very, there's a very real political message to the series as well. And there's something to be said for a series that twists things around a little bit. We've seen the X-Men for all of my life. I've lived with the X-Men, and we've seen the X-Men we've never seen the X-Men in Genosha. We've never seen the X-Men in a place of power, and now we actually see people with superhuman abilities in a place of power. And that's something that we deserve an opportunity to explore, and we also deserve an opportunity to see where the series is going to go. And rather than people who are just going to say make it 50 minutes of lockjaw every week, I think that the actors did the best that they could with writing. And I think that it's important for, at the very least, for people to give the show a chance beyond the first 2 episodes, because this is something that we as an audience have never seen before. We've never seen these characters with power. We've never seen these characters and how they might create their own society. There's no Genosha movie. There's no X-Men movie. It is always that which is different becomes hunted. And in this case, that which is different has had power. And now we're going to see what happens to those who have power when they face opposition, and when you know, we're going to see a dichotomy that I haven't seen yet in the MCU, and I think that enough is a reason in any part of the MCU, and there are kids now born who can't remember a time before there were Marvel movies, so they're working where I work, so that I think alone is enough to save it, and as well as the actors. I think that Anson Mount and Surinder Swan have some chemistry that I think, while very basic and very simple, that's part of their character. That's part of Medusa and Black Bolt's character. These are not characters that are well known. They predate the X-Men almost. And it's dealing with, and they're extremely incredibly powerful, so they're gonna be a little bit more removed from humanity. And I think that that's all things that audience members aren't taking into account. But I will concede, to my honorable, to the prosecution, I will concede, however, that you shouldn't have to think this in depth about a Marvel television show.
Okay, and you managed to do that with 6 seconds to go. That's not too bad. That was perfectly timed. Hang on. There we go. So excellent stuff. So that was the case for the defense, and I think it's time for me to kind of make my case. Certainly about the first 2 episodes. So 3 minutes on the clock. Here we go. So I went to see Marvel's Inhumans at Sheffield IMAX. This is a Cineworld screen, which is one of 2 laser-driven IMAX projections in the UK. There's one in London and one in Sheffield. It is pretty much the optimal situation that you can see an IMAX presentation here in the UK, which kind of then begs the question why it was wasted with this production. I'm going to be coming at it from a slightly different angle than Carolyn. Carolyn very much has an emotional investment in the characters, which I can totally understand. But if you don't have the presentation and the episode and the actual production backing you up, then that's where it falls down from its first initial start. I'm not going to be attacking the cast too much, because I really do feel that the faults of Marvel's Inhumans episodes 1 and 2 certainly were from the production side. It really did feel that at some points we had the heads of Marvel just stand at the top of a classroom somewhere saying, we're handing out class assignments. You get Captain Marvel, you get the Avengers. And then they got around to, okay, and who's going to, we're also going to do the Inhumans. And the entire class just went, oh, shit. And then they just pointed at 3 people at the back of the room and went, you're doing it. And they just went, oh, really? Okay, fine. And nobody felt invested. It didn't feel from the production side any kind of investment, to the point where, and we'll talk about this as we go through, the big failing for myself was the script, which always has to be the underpinning of a series. And I felt from watching this that it had the word placeholder right where the words dialogue should be, right up to the point where they were actually on set. It felt so rushed and last minute that the cast and indeed the crew were left out on the branch without a safety net. It was a shame, because this is a rich collection of characters which deserved so much more. So my talk on the Avengers, on the Inhumans, is going to be coming from more the production end and the way that I feel that they were let down. It says a lot that we talk about Agent Carter and we talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that those programs developed and grew because from rocky starts, because their production teams and the people writing the show and behind the show felt they had something to tell and a story they wanted to share. That is what was missing from Marvel's Inhumans for me. It just didn't feel that they gave a rat's ass. That's where I'm going with the mine. Right, and that's the 3 minutes done and dusted.
Perfect.
Okay, right. So we'll get started because we've got a little bit of a kind of a menu of things that we can address with the actual thing. And I will say that we are going to be talking about episodes 1 and 2. We are going to get spoilerific here. So if you haven't seen it, spoilers all the way through from here on in. If you haven't seen it, or if you don't want to be spoiled about the show, back the hell away right now. Come back at the end of September, and we'll, by all means, see if you agree or disagree with what we're going to say. So we're talking about 2 episodes that were joined together for an IMAX presentation. And for myself, it says a lot that I only really recognized that we were into the 2nd episode part of it when they started putting up the location cards at the bottom of the screen again. That was the only time it kind of twigged to me that we were into the next 45 minutes. There was no real sense of flow for me for the episode.
No, I mean, the pacing, you know, first of all, if I want to give a little bit of a brief background here on to anybody listening about pilot movies, because Marvel has released a couple of these pilot movies before for things like Spider-Man in the 70s. That got a theatrical release. Yes, there was a Spider-Man in the 70s. There are actually 9 live-action adaptations of Spider-Man.
Nicholas Hammond. That was my first Spider-Man.
And so we have to recognize that sometimes giving these things a release in theaters can bring it to an audience that you wouldn't normally see. Now, I'm not gonna disagree with you about the pacing on this, because I think that for the characters, I think it feels like there are pieces of it missing. I think it feels like there are pieces of the story that they did not have the time to tell, or that would have been included in a movie script that. But again, when you're dealing the thing.
Do you think it worked? As an hour-and-a-half movie? Because I mean, you're talking about stuff that you felt was missing. We've seen films where you've had a 90-minute film and they've managed to get all the story in. Do you think they were pacing it more as a television show that, okay, you are going to get the rest of this down the line?
I think they were pacing it more as a television show, and I also think there's about 10 minutes of footage. There's an entire character story arc that's either, I can't remember if it's missing from the 1st or the 2nd episode, that is not seen in the cut that you and I saw. It will be seen in the television premiere, which makes more sense. You know, there's a real debate right now between streaming and between movie theaters, because not a lot of people, I could barely afford to get out to the IMAX to see this. So not a lot of people, and the reason why I did was because I'm writing about it for different outlets. So not a lot of people are going to see it. And I think that once more people see it in TV, there might be some of those pacing issues fixed, but not all of them.
Yeah, I mean, my other half, I mean, I went to see it with 2 friends who have been to Comic-Con with me. We kind of know our comics stuff, and I went with my other half. Caroline didn't see any trailers. She went in blind. She actually did wonder why we were going to go to an IMAX screen on a Friday night to go and see a Marvel show, a television show, which at the end of the day will be coming out later. I wanted to see it because at the end of the day, we were promised something epic for a big screen for that was filmed on IMAX, and yet I could only see maybe 2 or 3 shots where IMAX was shown off to its full potential, and even then it wasn't really
it's exploited. Is it the hair? Because it's
no. Okay, so well, let's cover that then. We are jumping all over our menu, by the way, going left, right, and center. I know that a lot of people have been talking about the costumes and the hair and Medusa. Medusa in this presentation of the Inhumans, her hair is just a long, flowing, which only comes alive and only kind of interacts when she desires it. It's not kind of like the living thing that we see in the comics. It's something that it's a long kind of just post bum length hairpiece, which then sort of like expands and gets physical as she requires.
It's a Disney.
It's tangled. I actually quite liked it. I mean, I had no problem with that because at the end of the day, like the Tangled, she's going to have these armfuls of hair all over the place. This kind of worked. I had no problem with it.
I think one of the things. So this is where it's going to get really spoilery, guys. If you guys are watching this, one of the things that I think they did better in IMAX than I expected, because watching the trailers and watching how her hair looked, I do agree with the critics on how her hair looked, but I think that the IMAX shots, one of the few shots that was done well were the wider sweeping shots of how her hair moved, which makes what happened to it, while it happened in the comics, all the more tragic.
Yeah, I mean, there was the scene I think you're talking about is when they finally do try. Oh well, Maximus tries to take her down, and has members of his supporters basically coming at her. It could have worked really better if it was just pulled back so you could see this, because everything was happening within like a 5-foot circle, which was, again, it's a waste of the format. You could have had this kind of flowing action from the hair, which really would have solved. It could have solved the whole element later on where she loses her hair.
That's one of two things about, I think, the filming that the director kind of dropped the ball on, because there's something very poignant about when Medusa loses her hair, especially from a female perspective, because I was speaking to a Till and Rising podcast, which is the Inhumans podcast. I'll do a plug for that at the end, but I was talking to them, to the person who saw this, and the way that it's presented when she loses her hair is very remnant, and it's going to get a little dark here, I'm sorry guys, it's very remnant of an assault. Because what we see with Daisy and what we see with the rest of the Inhumans characters is that these powers are a part of who they are. So when the director made the choice to have her get her head shaved, that's extremely important, that we see how she reacts. That colors a lot of her actions moving forward. But the problem is, again, there is a visual aspect that was missing. Where do
you think they made a mistake with doing that so early in the series? I appreciate that it's something which drives her as a character, and to kind of the whole thematic of her having her hair removed. Number one, it saves on budget because then you're not having to animate all the hair and to get into that. But then you also are it's an incredibly strong element of who she is, and I think to have that happen in the first 2 episodes is too soon, because you're not establishing. Okay, let's talk about story structure then very quickly about that then. In that, all of the element, all the characters, you are launched straight into, when you actually start the episode, you are launched pretty much straight into the start of the coup, as it were, to the point where you aren't given any time to connect with the characters, to invest in the characters. I don't think it actually becomes readily apparent about Black Bolt being mute, or at least why he's mute, until about 10 minutes before the end of the first episode. He just kind of like implies that he's mute. That's it. Doesn't explain why.
Where you see I think I think
and that's down to story structure and down to the failings of the writing.
The biggest mistake that Scott Buck made, and the one thing, folks, and the one thing I'm going to agree with you on here is that in order for this series to progress, he has to go. There is no question. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. As I was explaining to people, no disrespect to the internet, but whatever Marvel executives have their loved ones in a saw-like trap in Scott Buck's basement, they need to extricate them as quickly as possible, because that's the only thing that I can think of, is that this dude somehow showed up out of nowhere in the MCU studios and was like, hello, I want to play a game. You give me 2 series that I will be showrunner on, or I will take your family and lock them in a basement.
Yes, I have the negatives. Give me a show.
Pretty much, because I was not a fan of Iron Fist. I was not a fan of Iron Fist. To borrow a joke from a far better writer than I am, it was literally 3 superheroes and their male clerk Danny Rand during the Defenders for me. So I am not a big fan of Scott Buck, but I went into this and what his biggest mistake in the story structure was that he wrote it for people like me, and he needed to write it for everybody. He wrote it for the kind of person who has seen all of the Marvel properties, who is willing maybe to give a little bit more than anybody else, and who's willing to think very deeply. And that's not how you make a successful product. You don't make it for the people who sit and obsess about the thing. You make it for everybody. You tell a story that brings the characters into a relatable sphere. I see a relatable story because Medusa's whole story arc, immediately, the moment that I sat there and I was trying to process this, her whole story arc was just, wow, that is something that that the only time we've ever seen anything like that was Jessica Jones. Wow, that is, you see Black Bolt and you're like, wow, you never see a character like that who is so overpowered they just can't talk. And then I'm realizing, as I read these reviews, I'm realizing I am taking way too much time to think about just the connections to all this. Because I can even answer, you can't discuss story arc. Okay, I want to really quickly jump back into costumes and production design, okay?
Go for it.
Just to demonstrate how deeply a person can think about this. Okay, the biggest issue that most people had with the Inhumans was the production design of Attilan and the production design of the costumes, and how everything was very simplistic, okay? And
I had no problem with it.
You didn't have any problem with it?
No.
Okay, see, that's because you are an intellectual, because I think 90% of the audience went in expecting the Guardians. I've got a big Guardians poster behind me with the fantastic 1970s Jack Kirby color. Now, that is what these characters need to be successful. But the issue is that when you look at the Inhumans from a story structure, you have to tie it back into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they introduced Grant Ward's Brett Dalton's Hive character at the end of season 3. Nobody wants to remember season 3 because season 3 was the biggest Inhumans arc. Nobody wants to remember it. But they introduced this character who was apparently banished by the Inhumans. Now, from a storytelling perspective, I'm going, well, okay, what if that character and that character's godlike abilities, because in the 3rd season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they brought back Brett Dalton as in Grant Ward's body, but he was actually a tentacled, one of the first Inhumans ever made. And he was this tentacled monstrosity who had the ability to inhabit the bodies of the living, or the bodies of the dead, and then had these massive parasites that would eat people or that would cause Inhumans to fall under his sway. Now, my first reaction when everybody was saying, oh, this is too simple, my first reaction after giving it far too much thought was, what if the reason why it's too simple is because after this character, who is still a part of the MCU canon, who was still someone who affected this, went crazy and turned all the Inhumans against humanity, they had to leave for the moon. Now, in the comics, there are different motivations for them leaving to the moon that all tie into the Fantastic Four. But what if this character's presence was what was responsible for them fleeing, and the very militaristic look of Attilan, it looked almost like Alcatraz. Okay, it looked almost
that kind of tied into Maximus's story.
Yeah.
the whole concept of. Oh, I'm getting a bit of an echo there. I think might be from your end. I'm not too sure.
Is there? What do you need me to do?
If you've got any headphones, that'd be great.
Hang on.
Yeah. Oh well, I'll jump in while you're looking for those. What I felt with the design, which it kind of dialed back to the whole idea of a naturalistic representation, which we had seen in stuff like Avengers, stuff like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In that we were being presented what these characters would be like if it was existing in this world today. And if they were banished to the moon, it would be a very minimalistic design. And yes, it was. It reminded me very much of the Barbican Centre in London, which is that kind of Rhinestein kind of square block, concrete kind of element, which is fine. And I kind of got the story element, and then I also saw the sequences shot for IMAX, and that was wasted. And then you got the sense of class structure within the people that on the moon that have gone through Terrigenesis and become Inhumans, and those that had gone through Terrigenesis and remained human, a subculture and a subclass on the moon. That was the only thematic element of the story which actually made any kind of interest to me, but it was kind of blitzed by so fast. And I think you're right, Scott Buck is the principal issue here, that his sense of story structure and his sense of timing for this particular project was so out of whack, that stuff was just blitzed over so quickly. Like I say, it almost felt like he was coming after he'd crammed the night before with something which he typed up and brought to the screen, to the set, and just gone, oh shit, I've got to type something now. Oh god, it was such a party last night. I'm doing this on a hangover. Type. Oh, that'll bloody do. It was so rushed, especially Ryan was. Some of his dialogue was so poor and so. It was just so bad. Especially this. I mean, there were two scenes certainly with him and Isabel Cornish and him and Surinder Swan, which just, I want to watch it again because I want to recall just how bad it was. And in my head, it was really bad. I just want to remind myself just how poor it was. So there's, in terms of the story structure, I think there were some really important themes there that were buried under poor production and poor writing. Would you agree with that, or?
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think. By the way, is the echo fixed? Yeah, excellent. Okay. I would agree that there is a lot of issues that you could have done a lot more, especially with an actor of Rayhone's caliber. I mean, like, the man delivered probably one of the most terrifying villain performances in Game of Thrones that I've ever seen. And
it was so one note in this, though.
Yeah,
he wasn't given anything to really grab hold of.
No, and especially for that. But there's a part of me as well.
Come on, you're supposed to be the defense now.
No. I am. That's why I'm saying there's a part of me that wonders: is it important to make him not as relatable and to not give him? Because there were people who were Ramsay defenders, and I hate to get political here, but as an American, unfortunately, that's become part of my existence, even more so. One of the things that really stood out to me with the Inhumans subplot was, here are all of these people underneath with that, oh, if you don't get anything special, then you're not a human being, okay? Or you're not an Inhuman. And one of the things that really stood out to me about that was, I hate putting stuff like this out on the internet, but I'm just going to come out and say it. It feels like what some people might think of if the alt-right Nazis won, okay? Like, here's a world where everybody is different, everybody is special, and all the cishet white dudes who are insecure and scared or whatever are going to go live in the basement, which is where they live anyway. But that to me was what this came off as. So you know, I want good writing, but there's so many people who are so into villains these days, myself included. I mean, for the longest time, I was the world's biggest Grant Ward supporter, and I had to take a step back and I had to recognize this character is very offensive to a lot of people. And I'll own that. And I'll own that I'll own that. I think Brett Dalton is a fantastic, sweet, wonderful human being, but I'll own it that the character is extremely problematic. And I wonder, are we doing, yes, we are supporting, you know, yes, it's kind of lame for story structure, but would we be doing people a service if our villains weren't so well written? I mean, you know, it's a very, I know I'm not going to get a lot of people who agree with me on that, but the fact of the matter was that was the first thing that hit me when because Scott Buck got to be cast in those pasty white dudes. And that was the first thing that hit me, was like, this is a dude who has a lot of interior motivations, and whatever point his revolution has is immediately shackle is kind of set aside by his own sense of inferiority. And that's something that I think so. I don't know, I'm not going to argue
but what was that actually put forward in the production that we saw? Because it really did feel, I mean, I'm actually feeling that across the board everyone was rather one note in terms of the production, that in terms of the direction as well, that there was no sense of, you didn't feel any sense of motivation inside. The only person who kind of did anything in terms of that character getting some kind of motivation, like you say, was Medusa Surinder Swan. I think she was served better from the script, but only bloody just. So at the end of the day, the characters have got the motivation, and I'm certain that the actors also have the skill to bring that to the fore. But they were let down by this very poor script, which didn't supply that. So we're kind of filling in the gaps, and we shouldn't do that. That's the director's job. That's the writer's job.
That is, when I say I argue for this show, I need to make it clear that I argue for this show to continue, but I do argue for it to continue with quite a few changes. And when I argue for it to continue with quite a few changes, it's that we need to have more people. You shouldn't have to think this intensely about the motivations of Black Bolt or Medusa. And you
should think about the motivations of any creative character.
No, surely. You should.
Otherwise, there's no connection. There's no reason to carry on being in their company.
Well, you shouldn't have to think this deeply, okay? I mean, Peter Parker. We'll go back to Spider-Man, since when I think of the release, I still think of the pilot movies that were released with Spider-Man. So we'll go back to Peter Parker for a moment. Peter's story is very relatable, but it's painted in very simple terms. Okay, it's something that every single person, no matter who you are, has been through in some capacity. And I think that with Inhumans, we are seeing something that we have, and I'm going to keep coming back to this. We are seeing something we have not seen before, and it's a great idea. But the question is, does the writing team have the chops to pull it off? Now, does Scott Buck have the chops to pull it off? No, I'm sorry, Iron Fist fans, and I'm sorry, Inhumans fans who appreciate Mr. Buck. I'm sorry to Mr. Buck. I'm sure that he has done his bit, but dude needs to just go away, because honestly, I think that he is he does not.
He's doing them a disservice.
He's doing them a disservice. He's doing the story a disservice, and he's doing the audience a disservice as well, because not everybody has the time to obsess over these things than I am. So yeah. I mean, like, and that's just it. Like, you have things you're going about in your day. I have things I'm going about in my day, but nobody should have to think this intensely about it. However, I question if there's anything at all that we can salvage from, maybe not from the story structure, but from some of the other issues that had propped up during the production. Now, I don't know who is writing episode 3.
I don't think anything's been released yet in terms of, no. I think we're only going to find that out closer to September, when we actually get the live schedule.
till we actually get the live schedule. But I think that there's something to be said for making. My problem is Maximus, man. Like, while I get that we want a relatable, realistic villain, there's a part of me that's always going to think it's creepy how many people want to kneel to Tom Hiddleston, man. I mean, just. You know, because people talk a lot about the MCU's villain problem, but having developed a very real appreciation for villains and standing, if you will, I think that is it such a bad thing to have a villain that's not as relatable? But a lot of critics came out of there relating to him. A lot of critics said that his dialogue, he was the character with the most development. So.
No, I kind of see that, because I understand where he's coming from as a character. I am one of those that will kind of read a lot into Maximus's character, in that he is feeling that he has been abandoned by his own genealogy, that he is somebody that is staring through the bars of the rest of the family, because he is not one of those, that he is a human. But he then sees the rest of the humans on. I think he also kind of is seeing two sets of bars. Not only is he excluded from his own family, but he's also excluded from the rest, the planet where he could actually fit in. That he could go to Earth and he would be the one that was normal, and the Inhumans aren't.
Now,
so at which point he then just, I think the coup is almost a means to an end. In that regard.
Defense, and the defense will concede to everybody. The defense will concede to the honorable prosecution that coup happened far too fast.
Yep.
I mean, you got absolutely. Suddenly, he touches a kid. The kid falls down, and suddenly he's just like, "I'm gonna overthrow my brother." And even then, there's so many underscore like. Well,
I mean, yeah, I think a couple of people missed that, actually, because this coup is ongoing, and you are actually mid coup from first frame, because the show actually starts with a chase through a forest, I believe on Hawaii, yes, with two Inhumans escaping from a three-man military team that has been sent there, and the whole thing has been set up by Maximus. That's right. That's a coup in progress.
Because he had to, you know what? You're right, because he had to have known. And see, that is ironically the biggest strength to a story that is so full of holes, is that in the process of trying to figure out what went wrong, you're going to pick up on things that the filmmakers shouldn't have made very clear, that the filmmakers didn't make very clear, but that also contribute to the larger story. So in a way, I wouldn't have remembered that. And I don't know if the audience at large, because they're so focused on the broad strokes, would have picked up on the idea that we're joining a story already in progress if it hadn't been so poorly written.
Correct. I mean, it says an awful lot that I was actually already being distracted. And we're going to get into the use of IMAX. I think we'll do that next, actually, because I think I was too busy focusing on the fact that the director was thinking, we'll have a slow-mo shot of a boot hitting a puddle. Why? What was the point of that? Because it takes you out of the story before it's even gotten started. At the end of the day, it's a director that has been given these cameras, thinks that he knows how to use them, and fails on every single level of how to use these cameras. And he was trying to use storytelling devices, which other directors have done better. And in doing so, you are taken away from the story and you miss stuff. For example, what was the other mutant's powers? I can't remember. The girl that was running away.
She had telescopic vision. She had funky eyeballs. She had weird.
That was it. Was it? What the hell?
She had cat eyes.
Oh man. Okay, fine. That was her super. That was Inhuman power. That's what I mean by this really poor production element, that there was just nothing left there. Okay, let's kind of block it together a bit in terms of the stuff then. The use of IMAX.
Okay.
Now, IMAX co-funded this thing. They provided the cameras and the resources for them, for Marvel Television and ABC Studios to use them. They then, like I say, co-funded the production. And indeed, several people have turned around and said that at the end of the day, putting these 2 episodes into cinema screens has netted the production $2.7 million in box office revenue. And at the end of the day, before the frame has even hit the screen, that's a nice little chunk of cash to go to the production.
It beats out Game of Thrones, because when they released the Game of Thrones cameras into IMAX, it's at 1.8. So
yeah,
narrow margin. Margin.
So, and not only that, but on a 3-day weekend as well, on a holiday weekend. So you can't deny the curiosity factor that they sold this show on. Then you have to look at what they actually did with the IMAX cameras, and they could have just shot this thing in 4K, and no one would have given a second notice. Am I wrong? Because can you think of any sequences where the IMAX cameras were used to full potential?
The sequences where they're taking it to Hawaii, I think, are in the level of detail that they bring. There's some shots of Gorgon in the 2nd episode walking across the beach that give you a sense of size, that give you a sense of, I think, what I want to know is, in the 10 minutes that we didn't get in the theatrical IMAX, do they take us into number one, I want to know how it's going to hold up on TV. And number 2, I want to know, would they take us into something where you can really get the expansive size? Now, you say you've been to San Diego frequently. You've ever been to the Air and Space Museum there, right? I
haven't been to San Diego. I've been to San Diego. I haven't been to San Francisco.
No, the Air and Space Museum in San Diego.
Oh no, yes, I have. Sorry, yes, I have.
The Reuben H. Fleet Space Center.
Yeah.
Growing up there as a kid, one of the things that's really important that is a very vivid memory for me is their IMAX screen before it became popular, and the fact that it was used to convey a sense of size. Now, we didn't. The defense will concede that the production design did not give the IMAX cameras enough of a sense of size, especially in regards to Attilan, because that's where you should see the sense of size, the sense of scope. That's where you should see tall, sweeping buildings. When you look at the Inhuman city, and when you look at Attilan in the comics, it's like Wakanda. Right before my showing of Inhumans, they showed the Black Panther and IMAX trailer, and I actually pulled out my phone and I tweeted, the Black Panther trailer in IMAX is the most beautiful trailer I've ever seen, because it shows you that sense of size. Now, the city did not convey that sense of size.
Now, is that a film director that knows what he's doing with the cameras, and this is a television director that doesn't?
Oh yeah, I'd buy that in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
I'd buy that in a heartbeat. But I think Raul Reen tried, and I think that it shows in the wide sweeping shots of Hawaii, in the sense of the crater. And what I wanted to see is the mines, because when you see the mines, you only see Maximus walking through the mines. You don't see the scope of the mines. You don't see the size. And there's things that they try to do with the characters. But what I want to see, because they proved that they could with the broad sweeping vistas in Hawaii, I want to see the size and the scope and the shape of Attilan. And that's pretty much my biggest, is like he said he'd used them before. I did not look and see if Raul Reen has actually, I know that Black Sails does a lot with size as far as the water does, and that's what I know him from. But that pretty much IMAX is what you use when you want to convey size, and they managed to do that.
And some real kind of, I mean, the thing about IMAX is you've got all that resolution, which it just goes on and on and on. And yeah, there was a couple of shots, like I totally agree. I mean, there was a sweeping shot of the Hawaii crater where Medusa lands. And there was also a couple of shots, like you say, on the beach with Gorgon. But for example, there was sequences where like Karnak in the forest, which was just Karnak there in the forest, really close to frame. you could have actually seen this expansive forest keep going and going, and it just felt like somebody had been given this toy and didn't know how to play with it.
I think that you got to learn how every toy works first. And if they did a sequel, I'm hoping that this gets a second season, if anything, so that we can remove some of the problems with the story structure and the characters and everything else. But if they did a sequel and they released a second set of episodes, then you would have more people who would know. Every tradesman has to learn their craft, and I think that audiences are far too. I mean, I don't want to say that we're spoiled, but we're spoiled. I mean, Guardians is one of my favorite.
It is a gorgeous looking film. Gorgeous,
absolutely. The use of color, the use of size. I saw it in IMAX. Absolutely beautiful. Doctor Strange, I saw it in IMAX 3D, and that was literally transformative. It was unbelievably transformative, and I know that there's problems with Doctor Strange, but honestly, like being there and seeing it in the IMAX screen with the 3D glasses on, paying the full $25 to just get in there and look at it, was unbelievable. But you have to teach people their trade when you're dealing with a rapidly changing and I think audiences might be spoiled just a hair. Now, that doesn't excuse if there's any production behind the scenes that's like, we got to get this out fast, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. And if IMAX is breathing down Disney and Marvel's back, because Disney has a stake in this too, you know, that doesn't necessarily excuse it. But when you're trying to adapt to a rapidly changing market, I mean, Guardians 1, like, again, I'm just gonna, for those people watching, I'm gonna put the poster for Guardians 2. Okay, you look at the color. Now, when you consider the poster for Guardians 1, there's nowhere near that much color. The MCU is a rapidly changing, evolving thing. And you have to teach the people who are involved in it, however briefly or otherwise, their trade and their craft. And I think as audiences, when you go in with a certain expectation, you go in expecting Guardians and you get Inhumans, and nobody knows that pilot movies that were shown in theaters is a thing that Marvel has done before.
I don't think anyone going into this was expecting Guardians. I don't think anyone going into this was expecting Doctor Strange. I think what we were expecting was a well-told story, even if it was just kind of a grey, militaristic, very stark building, city that you pronounce it different to me. I pronounce it Attilan. Is presented on screen. At the end of the day, that's a backdrop to the characters, and that's where I think I'm going to head to next, which is the casting and indeed the people that we saw on screen and the characters. I think, I mean, I can only turn around and say that while I have read a lot about, and I think the main one that we can talk about is Ewan Ryan, I've not actually seen Game of Thrones from season 2 onwards. Okay, I'm one of those. I read the books. I haven't seen the series. I'm going to catch up when I can, when I finally get a chance to do so. So I'm not actually familiar with his work. I came out of the Inhumans asking my friends, is he actually a shit actor, or was it just the character? Was it just the script? And I have been reliably informed it was the script. In that case, I then turn around and say, well, that will explain the really poor decisions and acting decisions and directorial decisions that were placed on Anson Mount, on Ken Loon, in a big way. Oh, good grief, Gorgon, which was so one note. It was a drone throughout the thing. Crystal was forgettable. But I'm trying to work out if it's the actors or the script. I've been informed reliably, no, the actors know their stuff and they can do this and they can project this. Let's talk about Black Bolt in terms of this inconsistent character that we presented.
when I first heard that Anson Mount had been cast as Black Bolt, I went to watch Netflix and Hell on Wheels. And to be honest, I heard he was so completely forgettable in Hell on Wheels. It was just another generic Western American story. But I was watching the eyes, because to me, the actor had to be able to convey the emotions with the eyes. And he did that. And I think that a lot of people will sell short the work that he did in trying to make his character in his sign language. Now, when I preface my argument here for this, I want to preface that I am not a deaf American, and I do not know ASL or BSL or any other sign language. And I'm very interested, very, very interested to hear from critics. You guys can reach me at CarolynsGeekOut. I am very interested to hear from any critics or anybody who is a member of that community who has seen and has opinions on the work that the actor did with the signing. But to have a character who actually signed was, I think, a major step forward for the MCU. And I think that the work that the actors did
I mean, in the comics, he doesn't, does he? He kind of like he almost communicates through sheer presence and sheer force of will.
He's telepathic.
Yeah.
In the comics, Maximus can read his mind, and he also communicates telepathically with Medusa. However, you can't have a constant voiceover, because then you'd end up with Aragon. It was another bad movie. You end up with Aragon if you had a constant voiceover, Anson Mount going, "No, baby, don't touch me there. I don't like it," in their head. So I think that the fact that the actor were the actors not served well by the script? Yes, but they put in enough work on their own, I think, to try and deliver some reasonable performances. And Anson Mount's Black Bolt was one of those. The fact he built his own. Everybody was posting about it. He built his own form of sign language. And again, I really want to hear from members of the deaf community about this, because I'm very interested to see if that's even respectful or where they're coming from. But the fact that he built his own form of sign language to create this character is not something that people should take lightly. And he managed to do it. And it's not something that we see. I mean, you see the Hulk struggle with the fact that he's literally one of the strongest beings in the Marvel Universe. Black Bolt is stronger than the Hulk. Black Bolt has fought the Hulk and knocked him out with his voice. Black Bolt's voice in the Old Man Logan comic has completely destroyed the symbiotes on top of a T-Rex.
Do you think we should have seen more of that? Or more of what he could. I mean, I was really hoping that we were going to see him kind of, because he was in the sequence, he's attacked by the police, which, by the way, very quickly, the Hawaii PD are not going to be too happy about the way they're represented in this program. Oh boy, no. Yeah, anyone who's in the law enforcement would pretty much want to stay away from the show for a while. But I was hoping that there was going to be a whack, and he just kind of like almost sneezes, which he does, kind of, and a building.
I freely admit it's I gotta take a poop face. It's
I was waiting. Instead a car gets flipped, I was waiting for a building to get flattened. I wanted that would not only have shown off the IMAX format to a better revelation, something epic on screen, but it also would have shown that the guy can flatten planets with his voice. That's, you know, he can.
That is fundamentally. See, Ren and Buck both understood the material and did not understand the material, and it's on them that they did not understand the material, because on the one hand, understanding the material, and this, again, speaking for me personally, when I deal with some very real anger issues, so I understand what it's like to have to put a lid on that, and to be very reserved, and to be, you know, keep it in, and to, like, it's like Elsa. Pretty much it's Elsa and Anna, but they're both dudes. And so when you're dealing, and nobody has ever been able to convey that story well. I won't go into Frozen or anything. I don't think they conveyed it as well in Frozen as they could have. But when you're dealing with a person who is so powered, Of course they're not going to be able, they're going to do everything, and a person who has a deep respect for life, or at the very least who doesn't want his people to come up and get attacked on the moon, you're dealing with a person who doesn't see reality in the same terms that you and I do. And there's a really poignant.
So why then is he so stupid in this?
Okay, give me an example of how he is stupid.
The way that he I mean, he's comes from this technological landscape. It's like if we had the I mean, that's the reason why I loved Black Panther in Age of Ultron. This is a culture which is technologically advanced and is treating the rest of the planet like they are in the Stone Age. That they come in and they automatically understand the rules of that world, even if they do agree that they are above that world. Whereas with Black Bolt, he comes in and he's like this guy that will just quite happily walk into a clothes store and steal stuff because that's him. I'm sorry, but you know you're in trouble. You know you're in a place of vulnerability. You are supposed to be a smart leader. You are hiding. I don't know. It seems so inconsistent. The whole thing seemed inconsistent.
It is. I want to go back to really quickly the thing about the thing about Black Bolt's personality. I think that you have to make it when you're discussing character motivations, and honestly, I don't know how anybody else would have conveyed those particular motivations, because Wakanda is a country that, from what I've read in the comics, Wakanda is a country that has chosen to have dealings with parts of the MCU, and is making the choice to have more dealings during Civil War. It was Civil War where we were introduced to Black Panther, so has chosen to make more dealings. And there was even a rumor, I remember, that T'Challa went to school in the United States, so T'Challa would have had that background. Now with Black Bolt, you would think that he would be a lot more you think that he would be a lot more understanding, a lot more compassionate. But, and this is something, again, this is something the audience hasn't seen before. When we see powered people, we either think of, and comparing these people to the X-Men is the worst comparison in the world. That's all I can, because it's two different groups of people in the MCU who both have superhuman abilities. And the humans, because the X-Men are the next evolution of humanity, the Inhumans were forced to be what they are, and we saw that in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. season 3. We saw the being that Hive became was literally kidnapped by the Kree and tortured and turned into this monster, and that's from the comics. They were built to be the Inhuman. They were built to be the Kree shock troops. They were built to be this never-ending army of people with 6 eyeballs and tentacles coming out of their ass that would just crawl across the landscape and take out whatever enemies the Kree had, and they rebelled because they're fundamentally still human beings. But I also I think that there's a degree of pride in being an Inhuman that you don't necessarily see in being a mutant. And we've had more contact with people. I mean, like, if you were to put, I can't remember if this has ever happened in the comics, but if Black Bolt were to go up against someone like Magneto, you know, I have to wonder, would they find common ground? Because they're both people who have these abilities. My point is, Black Bolt's character, if you have absolutely, they've only vaguely observed humanity from that weird little floating pool. And by the way, guys, it's a weird little floating holographic LED TV that's monitored by 2 different people. So picture 2 different people in your home holding up an LED TV, and they basically monitored all of our news programs. So they're literally getting nothing but fake news. So how would they know what's going on in what's actually going on, or how to actually interact with the world, especially since most of entertainment is built on exaggerated perceptions of reality? So plus Black Bolt said it could just be conceivable that Black Bolt, despite being the hero, is a dick. I mean, like, you know.
No, that's true. I mean, we could cover those with the other characters. And Gorgon, is, like I say, is a one note thug that just wants to punch, and I want to hit things, punch. And it's just kind of this, oh yeah, okay. I mean, don't even get me started on the whole. I'm gonna leave my communicator on. You guys need to get out of here. Cue half a day where no one bloody shows up. I mean, that's like launching a party and then everyone not showing up for it. But then that's a whole other ball game. That's going to show up in episode 3. And then you've got Crystal. I don't even know what her character is. Is she this preening prima donna? Because if that's the case,
she's there to represent this. She's there to represent Lockjaw.
That was the only character that had any kind of impact, I think, on screen. And it's got to be said, I did kind of come out of the screens and I was talking about Inhumans. Everyone just went, well, how much Lockjaw's in there? I went, well, he comes on and he wags his tail and he does the same thing 8 times. And there you go. That's it.
In the comics, he doesn't do. I mean, like he Medusa sends him in the comics to go and get different Inhumans, and Medusa. I will fight anybody who prevents me from getting. I will have words, very strong words, with anybody who prevents me from getting my Kamala Khan and Lockjaw team up, because they are probably some of the best parts. But that's pretty much all he does. I mean, the only difference between people expect this character now in the comics. There's a terrifying suggestion, and it was a later retcon, that Lockjaw was at one point a person, and that when he went through Terrigenesis, he came out as a giant dog with a dog's mindset and a dog's ideas, and that to me was just terrifying. But as you've seen, as we saw,
I'm going to say that actually makes sense. I have no problem with that idea. It's a half decent theory. I like it.
That he was a person that just turned into a dog, but. To be fair, excuse me, when you're dealing with Inhumans, like the fact that there's the character at the very end of the series, one of the minor Inhumans, is you're introduced to Edrak, the talking head, and it's this head that looks out of the wall. And I guess if I was willing to concede that this is a truly bad show, Edrak is the biggest part of it that would be bad, because he looks like a 90s special effect, like something you would see on Buffy. And
it looked like he turned around to someone over the weekend, went, right, you know that sequence at the end of The Matrix Revolutions, do that. But by the way, can you do it like in the next half hour, because we've got to get it done. Just do that and
Exactly. If I were to concede that this was an entirely bad show, my biggest argument would be that character, because not only are there the technical problems, not only is there that, but that character is so minor in the comics, and the fact that that character was still seen on screen before fan favorites that have made Marvel and Disney money, like Kamala Khan, is a travesty. I mean, like, honestly, that was my big. That's my. If I were to argue that it was a completely bad show, that would be my biggest starting point. But it's not.
It served the purpose, because at the end of the day, it got Crystal out of Attilan and into Hawaii. Why Hawaii? I think we kind of covered that at the beginning.
If you're gonna make a movie, make it in Hawaii, because
it's cheap, it's close, it's got some half decent locations. Yeah, okay.
I can't remember the last time they actually filmed a movie in Hawaii, though, apart from that one Aloha with Emma Stone. So I'd be very interested to hear just how many people actually get a chance to film in Hawaii. But
tell you what, let's move.
Yeah.
Okay, because we've got a couple of things in our menu that I'm just curious whether we can touch on. I'm just wondering, we've done the story themes?
Yes.
Because I think we've pretty much covered those, because I did feel it was the strongest element of the show, but it was also the biggest wasted element of the show, because there was stuff there that they could have just picked up and ran with, and they could have done it in an hour and a half. They could have done it in Yeah, okay. I know that you've talked about the Inhumans and the rest of the MCU, and we've also had these posts online about the inevitable crossover between Inhumans and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the rest of the MCU. The one thing I was actually hoping, I was hoping that the series was going to be a standalone series.
Okay.
Do you understand that? Or do you feel it's important that it needs to connect with Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
I think that there's enough. Honestly, I don't, I've been making all the comparisons to the X-Men throughout all of this, but I think that there's enough. I don't think that there's enough there to create a standalone series. I think that while the Inhumans might be fascinating characters on their own, they do the best when they're in a group. And they do the best, especially because in the newer comics written by Charles Soule and written by Inhumans Royals and stuff, the Inhuman Royal family is largely responsible for giving us Kamala Khan, Dante, and a bunch of new humans, and their whole job is to mentor the new humans. And we all know that the biggest
I thought that was actually one of the strongest parts of I'm going to forget the name of the event now.
Secret Empire?
Secret Empire. No, before Secret Empire.
Civil War II?
Civil War II. Sorry. How the hell did I forget Civil War II? Anyway, yeah.
It's okay. There's so many events we all forget.
I know. They're just, yeah, I know. Civil War II, I thought the Inhumans element of that conflict as this kind of like ethereal third party, this superpowered Sweden, as it were, kind of, I found that fascinating. And but I wanted to just, I'm perfectly happy with just finding out more about the Inhumans. You say you wonder if there's enough there to sustain a series on its own. At the end of the day, we've got this conflict between Maximus and the rest of the royal family, and I think there is enough there. But I to be honest, it's a little bit like Doctor Who, where they kind of felt that they had to bring back the old baddies just to have this sense of connection, this sense of sort of like ongoing, sort of like continuity. When I think, I mean, it's like Guardians. Guardians works because you don't necessarily need the rest of the MCU. It's its own little pocket of,
and that's that. I think that they did a disservice by not embracing. Okay, I will concede that they did a disservice by not embracing some of the weirder aspects of the Inhumans. Like, it will forever be weird to me that you can douse yourself in mist and come out with tentacles out of your ass and 6 eyeballs. I mean, after reading, Charles Soule did a great one-shot comic for Inhumans, and it was where he introduced a team led by Crystal in the comics, where the Cloud is going over India. And there was one guy who became a part of Crystal's team who lost his hands, and he was an engineer. And then this other guy who was an actor literally turned into Groot. Like, he was like this really hot Indian actor, and he's suddenly this giant tree man, and it's just really bizarre stuff. So I could see how, but I think that I don't know, I would have to read more of some of the original comics just to see how it holds up, because the stuff that I'm the most familiar with is the Inhumans training the next generation. And that's why, if anything, I want to keep the show around, because you've got the potential of bringing those themes that have been explored in the comics into the series. Exactly. And you've got Gorgon, like you were talking about. Gorgon's a one-note thug. Okay, Gorgon in the comics ends up becoming the sort of unofficial mentor to this kid, Dante, who turns out to be a new human, and his mother ends up dying, and his sister ends up having an Inhuman kid. But Gorgon sort of becomes an unofficial mentor to him. Medusa becomes an unofficial mentor to Kamala. And she's kind of like helping her and guiding her on these things. And the Inhumans characters that we have in the MCU right now need a degree of guidance. They need, because Daisy Johnson, whether or not you like the character or not, Daisy Johnson literally is responsible for pushing the plane with the Terrigenesis crystals into the water, because she didn't find any other solution, or she didn't find any other solution but she's never faced up to the consequences of that. And that's one of my biggest brief hopes for season 5, is that an ugly new human will appear, and Daisy Johnson will be found out as the person who pushed the Terrigenesis into the water and gave all these people their powers. I need to see more ugly Inhumans. That's been the biggest thing that I wanted out of the new movie, or out of the show, was I wanted to see people who had the multiple eyes and the tentacles and the weird looks.
It's the reason why the Thing was always the character which I gravitated towards in Fantastic Four, because while the rest of them have got these super cool powers, some of which they can turn on and off, he is stuck with this deformity. I don't know if that's a word that applies strictly here, but no, it's this thing that he can't escape from his own body. And I think is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Am I putting words in your mouth? Sorry.
No. I think that was, while I see the importance of like shaving Medusa's head, I think that it would have been a real challenge for her to adapt to the world that she lives in with her, with the shaved head. But I see the relevance.
I just still don't think that enough time was spent on that for people to understand why that was important to her. I don't think, if I didn't have experience with people who, I don't think if like you didn't see in the media all different stories of people who've been through that sort of thing, I don't think, and I'm very anxious to see how many if other women or other men or anybody else who's been through that experience will pick up on that. With that character. I think that would be very interesting to see how they react to that, because that was a very meaningful moment, so to speak. I believe it was a very meaningful moment,
but
the script didn't tell us it was, or the show didn't tell us it was. So the defense will
concede that.
Okay, fair enough. Right, so that's in terms of that's kind of touching then on where it can go from here, because obviously, yeah. I kind of really should have really nailed down that we were going to be critiquing episode 1 and episode 2 of the Inhumans as a standalone presentation, and at the end of the day, as an hour and a half film, I don't think it held up. But now we have to look forward to the rest of the series. At the end of the day, it's an 8-episode commissioned series that is going to happen, and it will go forward. So now we have to ask where the show can go from here. Okay, I think we both agreed that number 1, Buck out the door, bugger off. Someone else needs to take over. That's obviously not going to happen for this first series. So then we have to ask, within this 8-episode structure, this first season, where the show is going to go from here. Is there enough at the moment of a jumping point? Because everything, well, not enough happened in those first 2 episodes. Like I say, you didn't feel there was any forward momentum in episodes 1 and 2. Do you think, is there enough to go ahead from here, from those first 2 episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you have to, you might have to do a little bit of mental gymnastics, which no viewer should have to do. But I think that there's enough on Black Bolt. We have Black Bolt in jail. The series saw him in jail. The series saw him realizing that perhaps he was out of his depth, out of his element, which I think was conveyed very much by Anson Mount, especially when he saw people pointing his guns. And whether or not he wanted to decimate the planet, I think that was a part of what made him a good ruler, was because he just saw this and was like, okay, well, I could either knock Hawaii off the map by saying aloha, or I could just kind of acquiesce and then find a way to get out of this particular situation.
It was the only element that did reflect from the rest of the series that he has done bugger all on Atalan. He has stayed neutral. He's stayed behind this kind of impartial wall, and then when he's in jail, he stays utterly impartial. It's almost like he's this kind of, he's just going to let everything just wash over him.
one of the things that we did see was we saw a flashback, and while some of the pieces of the flashbacks in the coup, especially where they decided to use rock music to try and convey a point, was a little bizarre. When we saw a flashback of Black Bolt destroying his parents by just going, "Why?" and suddenly they are dust in the wind. And that's a big, everyone was like, "Oh, he's not going to talk at all." No, he talks. He just doesn't know when. I think that one of the biggest changes from the comics was that in the comics, Maximus sort of ends up tricking Maximus is responsible for their parents' death, but he tricks Black Bolt into thinking he did it. Now, unless this flashback is false, which you never know in these kinds of stories, unless this flashback is false, Black Bolt is wholly responsible for taking out his mom and his dad. And I think that alone, whatever relationship you had with your family, if you were the one who literally realized that something about you was what killed your parents, I think that would drive home, I have to be very careful with a sense of who I am.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm here. He's being very cautious, very judicious with his abilities, and
it was the only story arc, or the only element of the story arc that of all of them that actually made any sense.
Yes. Well, yeah. Once you dig beneath the surface.
As long as we very quickly, if we want to talk about it, if we very quickly with Karnak. Okay, there's this guy that can kind of predict the future. How didn't he not predict that he was going to fall off a cliff?
He hit his head. He hit his head.
When he fell off the cliff.
I wonder if the Earth's magnetic pole affects him. Or if there's something going on. Karnak was actually honestly, Kevin Lung's delivery made Karnak my favorite character. Like, I loved Black Bolt, I loved Medusa. The two had good chemistry to me, but Karnak's delivery made him one of my favorite characters. And yeah, people were like, "What's up with his weird Doctor Strange powers?" And I'm going, it's something we haven't seen before, and it's really kind of, they were trying to figure out how to do it. And in the comics, he doesn't even have powers at all. So it's like, it's very interesting to see how they managed to translate that. But there could be any number of issues in play, especially if, as you said, the coup is already in progress. How many Inhumans are already in Hawaii? How many of them have abilities that might interfere with that sort of thing? The defense will concede that Marvel has not developed its Inhumans lore well while trying to create a shared universe. The X-Men, it's very clear. The Guardians, it's very clear. Everybody is coming from a very clear place. But in this case, you have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. Working
on developing one big thing, and what they needed to do is
who I also don't think understand it themselves either.
No. I have to honestly wonder, because Jed Whedon and Marissa Tadcheron started the Inhumans ball rolling once they got the green light that we were going to have Inhumans and the Kree and possibly a hint at the Skrulls. See, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the MCU's laboratory for writing stuff. They introduced the supernatural elements before they introduced Doctor Strange. They introduced the idea behind the Infinity Stones before they introduced that. They introduced Hydra before the big Hydra takeover. The Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., for everybody who sits there and goes, "Oh my God, it's not connected to the MCU. I'm a sad panda. Why can't I ever see X person talking to Y and Z?" Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is connected to the MCU the same. It's connected to everything. It's connected to the MCU the same way that Marvel is connected to Disney, honestly. Just because Disney isn't putting Marvel in everything and slamming you in the face with Captain America's shield doesn't mean that they're not working together to build a cohesive story. It doesn't mean that there aren't people sitting up at Burbank over here in California right now who are like, "Gosh, the Inhumans stuff was just terrible. I don't know how we're going to recoup our losses, Bob. Well, we're going to put out another Guardian series. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that Jeff Loeb understands he's on a tight leash now. That's what we're going to do." But fundamentally, whenever I was explaining this to my coworkers, I would always jump in with, "I can't believe you guys didn't understand that I thought I wanted the X-Men. How come you didn't give me the X-Men? Instead, you got me the Inhumans. Nobody knows who they are. Gosh, oh boy, I don't know. All I wanted was weird superpowered people. I don't understand." But you have to recognize that Disney took Captain America and Iron Man were B-level celebrities. DC has the advantage of all of their big three have stayed in their wheelhouse, and thanks to Marvel, the two biggest characters that everybody knew, my esteemed partner over here remembers Spider-Man and the X-Men, and neither of them were there when Disney bought Marvel. So there's going to be growing pains with new properties, absolutely, but there's so many different extenuating factors. We'd be stupid to turn down any future storytelling opportunity. So maybe there's an Inhuman, drawing it back to Karnak after a long segue. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Maybe there's an Inhuman who has the ability to block Karnak's ability. Maybe there's something going on with the space chick, because there's a space chick. We have yet to see space chick. We saw her briefly for 2.5 seconds in it, but we don't know where space chick is. And she's normal and she's space chick. And it's like, well, okay, apparently we're not getting, the audience isn't knowing what's going on until whenever space chick comes in. So I can't even, it's just a testament, unfortunately, to how this series needs a little bit more help, because I can't remember her name because her name is
yeah. From my perspective, I mean, I agree with the defense that there is so much that it could draw from, and also so much it could extrapolate into and extrapolate from all of the history that we've seen when it comes to the stuff in the comics. And yeah, I've read the comics. I'm aware of what the characters can do and what they can't do, and where we are in terms of the printed medium. But I've got to see something from that an hour and a half. It's got to contain in that box, and that box has got to tell me what I need to know. I can't. It's like you say, you can't then go off and need to. I mean, it's very much like the end credit stuff on an MCU film. At the end of the day, you've got 2 or 3 people in the room that will know what that is. At the end of the day, the rest of the people don't, and they shouldn't have to. The rest of the film is the film. That's just at least an Easter egg at the end. This entire series of what we've seen, though, seemed to be just nothing but the remnants of Easter eggs, if that makes sense. There was no self-contained element to the whole story, and the self-contained stuff that was there was so badly delivered that the impact of it lost weight. Hello there, Lockjaw. How are you?
That's just it. Lockjaw was, at the very least, what they're going to hinge on. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't right. I'm not saying that this is fair. I'm saying that Lockjaw is going to be what they're going to hinge on as a self-contained element. Is it juvenile?
And as a selling point as well.
And as a selling point. Is it juvenile? Absolutely. Is it ridiculous? Absolutely. Is it not something that you would expect from people in television? Absolutely. But it's the most self-contained element, and they went in knowing that. And if keeping this series around gets Lockjaw into the MCU at large, letting him be the big connecting tissue, then I'm here for it.
Fair enough. Okay. In terms of the rest of the series, I will be watching from episode 3 onwards, with my fingers crossed that someone has been paying attention over the last month, in the desperate hope that there's someone in an editing booth trying to restructure the series into something frantically trying to make this into a cohesive story. But at the end of the day, episode 1 and episode 2 exist as they are right now. They have been shown on screen. They've been released into the wild. And you could not attach Lockjaw to my privates and drag me to watch episodes 1 and 2 again. I just can't do it. It's the thing. I'll come back to it. I still feel that with Agent Carter was misaligned by the audience, because at the end of the day, it deserved a better audience. I personally think it was a perfectly strong series. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a perfectly strong series. I have been reading off the back of the Inhumans reviews about how people aren't going to watch this because it's crap, and they shouldn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because it was crap. Bullshit. Anyone who saw the last 2.5 seasons, or certainly the last 2 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. know how strong that series is. But they started because the people that were behind it knew how to build a defined world and go from there, however small the audience was. This has got an audience. We know this because it's made a reasonable amount of money in IMAX, but it's not strong enough yet. That's my take on it.
That is the defense is going to have to agree with the prosecution. My whole thing, the reason why I'm coming on, and you're not my only podcast today, but the reason why I'm coming on and talking to people about this is because I do believe that there are pieces here worth saving. And well, it's a new take on a bunch of classic material. And I don't necessarily, and it's not like, to me, to cite Mr. Buck's previous work, Iron Fist could have been so much more. What is the man's problem with showing mystical cities, with wanting to write about mystical cities and then not putting in the work to make them happen on camera? What is his deal with that? What is his deal with introducing these different characters? But
with Doctor Strange, we've kind of understood. I mean, with the whole gods and monsters thing, that was explained in Thor. The whole magic thing was explained in Doctor Strange. We can do magic now. Why can't they do that in Iron Fist? At the end of the day, it should be a direct delineation to Doctor Strange, that it's drawing from the same energies.
I think that there's also something to be said. Netflix has not so far shown a desire, and as a big Ghost Rider fan, Netflix has not shown a big desire to see more of the supernatural elements on their streaming. So I wonder how Hulu, for instance, might take, because 2 of the characters, one of the biggest character in Marvel's Runaways, coming soon to New York Comic Con, one of the biggest characters in Runaways is a magic user. So I wonder how Hulu might tackle that topic, and if they decide to tackle it a different way, then if ABC, Disney, and everyone might move more programming that's more supernatural to Hulu. But I think my biggest, you cannot discuss culture in a vacuum without admitting that there are other aspects to it. And the fact was that Danny Rand, and to a small extent some of the pieces of the Inhumans, was just so gosh darn boring, white, boring and white. I mean, like, and it could have, that's not to say the series doesn't have its fans. That's not to say I don't know people who worked on it who've had a good time. That's not to say that I don't respect anybody who thinks that it's fine. It's just boring, and it comes out together. But the Inhumans, I am very anxious to see who will be writing later episodes of the Inhumans, because I have 2 wishes for the rest of this series. I will forego a Kamala Khan appearance in season 2 or 3. I will forego the introduction of more new humans in season 2 and 3. My 2 wishes are, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get one. Number 1 is an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. crossover at the end. And I will tell you why I think I'm going to get that one. Because Chloe Bennett was in Hawaii with a big group of people around right when they were wrapping filming. So I would not put it past Marvel, ABC, and everybody else that she has filmed some sort of cameo and some sort of connection in that to the Inhumans. All the more reason why Marvel is just letting this series sit there, because it's going to tie into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. season 5, which we know nothing about. So Marvel is going to defend this till their death, because it's going to tie into season 5, which is going to tie into Infinity War. All roads lead to Infinity War. The other thing that I want, pretty much the other thing that I want is just to have an opportunity to see more marginalized takes and more marginalized creators on screen. I think that, or behind the scenes, I think part of the biggest strength of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been Marissa Tancharoen. And I don't know what the makeup behind the camera looks like for Inhumans, but I can only hope that they took their lessons from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because one of the things that I've noticed was that both with the X-Men and with Inhumans, it's been a very particular group of people writing it. And I think that if there's different people behind the scripts, apart from Buck, then Inhumans would be something really special. And I would really
I'll go. I will concede to those.
Okay.
I will concede to those. If I was going to ask for 2 things, Number one, Buck needs to go, or I want to see his name. I want to see his name less in the Wikipedia listings of either writing or just generally involved. I want
save your family members, Marvel TV. He doesn't have to hold you prisoner for long.
Yeah, fair enough. Just right. He needs to just step away because he doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. Number two, I want to see these characters cut loose. We have these superpowered characters which have, at the end of the day, not been hiding in the shadows. Yes, they've been on the other side of the moon, but they have been in their own contained world and have developed a royal family, a community where they are honored and respected and therefore allowed to be who they are. Now, on Earth, let's have them be who they are, which is Inhumans, which means let's cut loose with some powers. Let's have Medusa grow her hair back. Let's have everyone cutting loose. Because I think that's, at the end of the day, we've got these well-trained, comfortable in their skin, superpowered people on Earth. Let's cut loose. That's what I want.
The Gifted, Marvel, there's really, I'm going to concede those 2 points as well, Marvel. If you guys are putting in mutants together with the Gifted and you're having them show their powers, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever for you to not have Medusa grow her hair back. Just saying.
Yeah. It happened too soon. It happened too soon. I think the powers of the Inhumans just weren't developed enough before they were emasculated. And I think that was just down to the story. That was down to the way it was told. But there we go. I think we can safely say that we've reached a middle ground on this. But I also think that all of our points have been valid on today. Thank you so much indeed for joining me today, Carolyn. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Where can people find you online, and what are you up to next?
CarolynsGeekOut on Twitter. I'm working on stuff for the Marvel Report. Again, shout out to the Marvel Report, Andy Beckbat, Lauren Galloway. Also, a lot of my points today came from the Attilan Rising podcast. Look up attilanrising.com. I was actually going to come back to that. Dare I ask what their reaction has been? They enjoyed it. It could have been a lot. It could have been a lot more. We're all in agreement that it could have been a lot more. I think that when you're faced with so many different really problematic, and I'm not saying problematic in a crazy way, but when you're faced with so many different problematic takes about media, the fact that this is just a dog in a silly wig, I mean, that's for me. And if someone brings me fan art of Lockjaw wearing Medusa's wig, I don't know what I will do for you, but I'll find a way to do something, because I think that'd be hilarious. Just a giant dog in a long, silly wig. Because Jeff Loeb brought it out and he was wearing it, and I'm like, I need to see Lockjaw wearing it, man. But Carolyn's Geek Out, Marvel Report. I just started writing for Screen Rant as well as a contributor, so feel free to check out my bio in there. Thank you. Feel free to check out my bio in there, and gonna go ironically to a screening of a better film. I'm not gonna say what. Because it's technically a better film, a pickle and thyme, if you will, tonight. So gonna go see a screening of that, and very excited to see how that plays out. Fair enough. Excellent stuff. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. My name has been Leonard Sultana. You can find me on an EnglishmanInSanDiego.com, and also on all the social medias at EnglishmanSDCC. That has been our Battle Royale. I think it's been a little bit more of a meeting in the middle of the battleground. I think it's been our little kickabout. Kind of just we stopped the cannons firing, and we just found a little bit of middle ground. I can deal with that. Of course, if you have any comments about today's conversation, do drop them down as comments to either myself or Carolyn. And of course, you can put them in the comments below in the YouTube, and also in the audio version as well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today, and indeed to our audience.
Take care, and
we'll see you later.
We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.